this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over some more aspects of disjunctions. Namely, I'm going to look at some of the problems from the book, from pages 101 to 107, and I'm also going to give you some stuff that's going to prepare you for both quizzes 6 and 7. All right, now let's get into some of the translation problems from number 1. These are starting on page 101, these problems. And the problems that I'm looking at here go all the way up to page 106. So these are problems from pages 101 to 106. Let's take a look at number 1. Number 1 is just a bunch of translations, and what we're going to do is we're going to translate them. Now I'm going to go ahead and say here, these translations that the author of your textbook does are way more challenging than I would like them to be because of the ambiguity of the text. So I'm going to some of them here I'm going to kind of say the way I would put them too, because I don't like how ambiguous it is. But if you can get through these, you can definitely get through the ones on the quiz. So let's start page 101. The woman must be either mad or drunk. That's inclusive. Okay, mad or drunk. She's mad or she's drunk. Now, the author of your textbook actually doesn't use the exclusive or symbol at all. He does something else with exclusive disjunctions. But if I see an exclusive disjunction, I think it's a well-formed formula to put it in its XOR form when we get there. I'm just going to go ahead and point that out now. But this first one here, 1A, is pretty easy. 1B. Either the eyewitnesses are mistaken or this is not the body of Nathaniel Cater. Now then, the author of your textbook puts this one with a glossary, unfortunately. So you look at that first one, the eyewitnesses are mistaken. You notice E stands for the eyewitnesses are correct. Oh, that means the eyewitnesses are mistaken means they're not correct, or this is not the body of Nathaniel Cater. All right, fine. Now, C is the first one here where I really don't like the way that the author of the textbook does it. He says, Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary does not begin with A or end with Z. So I'm just going to say this here. It looks like it could be one of two things, okay, because of the way the author of your textbook has put it. Okay, it looks like it could be the Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary does not begin with A or Z, or we're even talking about a disjunction when we're talking about the problem. It looks like it could be it does not begin with A or Z. So which one is it? And I'll say this, the way that it's given in the textbook, it is not clear which of these it should be. Now, it is this one on the left, because it's saying Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary. Does it begin with A or Z? No, it doesn't. That's actually what the line is saying. But it's not clear, or as clear as it should be in the way that it's been produced here. So if I were to give you this problem, I would say something like, it's not the case that the following, it's A or Z. Okay, letting you know it's the whole thing that's being negated. So yeah, it's ambiguous here. Is the whole thing being negated or just the left side? The way that the problem is written, it's hard to tell. This is the correct answer, but if you put the other one, because of the ambiguity of the text, I think I'd have to give it to you. All right, let's take a look at D now. Now we're flipping over to page 102. It says this. They better lose the attitude and listen to their dad, or they won't get diddly crap. Okay, so it says this. They better lose the attitude and listen to their dad, or, so they better do both these things, or they won't get crap. So I'm just going to say this as an aside. This is the correct translation of this. To show you how this works with one of the rules that we were talking about before was material implication. Remember, that allows us to change a wedge into an arrow. Now, that has nothing to do with the translation here. I just want to say this. If we wanted to do that here, remember what we do is we keep the stuff. All right, this is not part of the translation. I'm just saying to make this make more sense. Like, they better lose the attitude and listen to their dad, or they won't get crap. All right, if we want to change something from a wedge into an arrow, what we do is we keep the left side, we keep the right side, we change the symbol, and then remember we negate the left. So what this is saying, this is logically equivalent here, If they don't lose the attitude and listen to the dad, then they won't get crap. That's exactly what this is saying. Okay, now this is the correct translation here, but we can deduce this from it because that's the way that works. Okay, let's take a look at E now. If our TV repairman says he'll be there Thursday, he'll be there Thursday, or the cost of the labor is on us. Now, this one's actually pretty straightforward. If he says he'll be there Thursday, then he'll be there Thursday, or the cost of the labor is on us. Okay? And like I said, when it comes to are these inclusive or exclusive, the way that I'm looking at it is you'll know it's exclusive if it says but not both. So if it doesn't say that explicitly, go with the wedge. If it does say this explicitly, then that means that's going to be an exclusive disjunction. Okay, so just if it's a default or, you don't know. If it doesn't say but not both, just go ahead and stick the wedge in there like I've been doing. Notice none of these have been XORs. Okay, F. Okay, F says this. Knowledge will die if he does not continue the dialysis treatment or undergo the kidney transplant. So he will die if what? So that means there's an arrow in here, and he will die. He's on the right side of the arrow. If he does not continue the dialysis treatment or undergo the kidney transplant. So this is another one. This is actually, it reminds me of C here in that where does the squiggle go? Does it go on the, is it negating the whole thing or is it negating the left side? So what two things do we have here? We've got if he does not what? Continue the treatment or undergo a transplant. So think of it. Here, I'll put it this way. So this would be, we definitely know this is going to be the left side, so there's going to be parentheses around it. This is quite done. Not quite done. So the question then becomes, where does this squiggle go? Does it go on the outside, modifying the whole thing, or does it go on the left side, just modifying the C? So think about it this way. If I put it this way, this would say, if he doesn't undergo if he does not continue the treatment, or he undergoes the kidney transplant, then he will die. Now, that says, so that means that there's a possibility here that he undergoes the transplant and he dies. I don't think that's what's wanting to be said here. I mean, I guess that's a hypothetical possibility, but it seems like this is what it's actually saying, and thus the left side of this arrow is kind of like what's going on in C here. It's saying if he doesn't do this or this, then he's going to die. Okay, that's what's going on here in F. That one's also one of the starred problems. It's in the back of the book, so that's how, on those starred problems, or they're in the back of the book, I know that it's confirmed that it goes on the outside. But like I said, because of the way that it's worded, I would probably be willing to give it to you if you gave it that way, because of how it's worded. Which is why, on my quizzes, and I'll give you a couple of examples when we get there, it's going to be much more explicit to determine, and therefore much easier to determine, is this, where do the negations go, and also is it exclusive or inclusive. Okay? Let's take a look at the next batch of number 1. Okay, so now G, and this is also on page 102. Either Ambassador Aoki had to take responsibility, or Foreign Minister Ikeda had to take responsibility, or the Prime Minister had to take responsibility. Okay? Now notice, it doesn't say there, but not both. So these are still inclusive disjunctions. So what do we got? The Ambassador, or the Foreign Minister, or the Prime Minister. Okay? The translation, insofar as it is done. This is actually pretty straightforward. Is this dyadic, though? Is this well-formed? No. So we have two options. We could put the parentheses here, because if it's all matching wedges, so this is the case for all three of these. You got all XORs, all wedges, or all dots. Now, no mixing and matching here, but if you have a series of these, a series of these, or a series of these, it doesn't matter where you put the parentheses. Now, if you start combining things, like let's say you had A, XOR B, wedge C, even though those are both ORs, you can't put the parentheses wherever you want. If they all match, so if instead of that wedge there we had an XOR, oh, now here you can put the parentheses wherever you want. Okay, that's fine. So if you got all matching, that doesn't work with arrows, it doesn't work with double arrows, but it works with wedges. So we could also say for G, same thing. We could also say A, wedge, F, wedge, P, and that's just as correct. because if it's all wedges, and this is here, I'm just saying here's another option. So this is version 1, this is version 2. Both of these are just as correct. I have no preference. Okay, really, between these two. Okay, however, the difference here is, as opposed to ands, we could break these apart here. Wedges don't break. Disjunctions don't break down in the same way. Okay? H. If Rutgers doesn't protect its quarterbacks any better than Pitt did, there's the comma. So if it doesn't protect its quarterbacks, then what? Lucas, and it does this weird thing here. Lucas and or Forte will be bludgeoned. That and or is just a way of saying the inclusive disjunction. Okay? Because when we say the XOR, we're saying but not both. So what that means is the wedge is kind of implying maybe both, possibly. That's what's going on there. So when it says and or, and really I guess you could say that for all inclusive disjunctions. We could say and or if we really wanted to. That ends up being, I think, sloppy English. But you've probably used that before. So we know this is on the left side of the arrow. What's on the right side? Then Lucas will be bludgeoned or Forte will be bludgeoned. Bam. Okay. I. Our Constitution is blind. Okay. And then we get this. All right. So this is new here. And I'm going to just you'll see this. We're going to see construction here we haven't seen yet. Neither or neither. Neither nor. As opposed to the either or. So if you see either or, what does that let you know is happening? That lets you know, hey, that's a wedge. Okay, when you see either or. Okay, there's an inclusive disjunction happening. There's a sense in which maybe it's an exclusive. But we'll just go with that for now. If you ever see either or, just go ahead and put it as an inclusive disjunction. When you see neither nor, what does that mean? It means you've got one of these. You have an or statement with a squiggle on the outside. Okay, it doesn't mean this, where you get like a, squiggle A, wedge, squiggle B. It does not mean that. Okay, don't do that. Okay, because that's not what it means. It means if you saw neither A nor B, it's saying A or B, nope, not this one and not that one. That's why it's got those two ends. Not this one or not that one, which is why I think De Morgan's law, remember, if we wanted to use De Morgan's law here, De Morgan's law allows us to switch from wedges to dots. Look, if we did this, keep the letters the same, switch the symbol, what do? Flip the slots. Outside is on, so we're going to turn it off. Left is off, so we're going to turn it on. Right is off, so we're going to turn it on. Using De Morgan's law, we can realize that saying neither A nor B is the same thing as saying not A and not B. Okay? So with that in play now, knowing that, when we finish this problem, we'll see, it says, our Constitution is blind and, so dot, neither knows nor tolerates classes among citizens. So that neither nor means we've got a wedge and there's a squiggle on the outside. So what are the pieces on the inside? It neither knows nor tolerates. Now, the neither nor is a particular construction. So neither nor. If you just see nor by itself, if you can believe it, it means and squiggle. That's why I want to avoid it most of the time. Okay, nor. You think, well, how could that possibly mean and squiggle? But if you see neither nor, that means you've got a wedge with a squiggle on the outside. So for example, if I said neither A nor B, that would be this. But if I said A nor B, that would be A and squiggle B. Now I'm going to avoid this construction because that sounds like that should not work. That just sounds wrong. But when nor is by itself, its meaning is and not. When it's put in with this neither stuff, it means this construction. So just know that in case it does come up. And because of De Morgan's law and conjunctive conditionality and material implication, you can kind of figure out why that works. But in English, it ends up just sounding, I think, fuzzy. Let's take a look at J. It is illegal to feed or harass alligators. Okay, this is another one with a glossary. F is it's legal to feed the alligators. H is it's legal to harass alligators. So those two things, let's put them together. It says feed them or harass them. Is that legal? Now we have two options here again. Okay? Is the negation it's illegal? Does it mean this? Or I mean this or separately. Is it this? So think about what this one means. This one means it's illegal to feed the alligators or it's legal to harass them. Now, it is inclusive, but that makes it sound like, one's good and the other's not, which is why it's this one. It's not legal to do this one, or maybe both. This one is saying, actually, what this is saying, because of De Morgan's law, think about it. If we keep our letters, change this into a dot, and then we change our negation slots, outside is off, so we turn it on, left is on, so we turn it off, right is on, so we turn it off. What this one's actually saying is it's impossible for both you to feed and harass an alligator. If you gave it food and harass it, that's impossible. That's actually what this is saying because of its derivation. And we know that's just nonsense. So that's why J here is actually what I have here up on the screen. And again, it makes it actually kind of similar to what was going on in C or on the left side of F. Next, let's take a look at K, and K is another one with a glossary. It just says, if either this or this is true, if either S2 or S3, or both, which is telling you, it's inclusive, are false, then S1 is false. And then we got a glossary. A stands for S2 is true, and B stands for S3 is true, C stands for S1 is true. So the glossary there is a little bit confusing, but I'll just say we've got this. It's saying if either of these is false, or both, which means here's what's going on here. We can say if this is false or if this is false. Okay, if either one of these is false, then what? Then this is false. So this is actually one where there's not a squiggle on the outside. Now notice it didn't say neither nor, and it didn't have only one negation out there. It said if either of these is false. So if this one specifically is false, or if this one specifically is false. So when we zoom out and take a look at the whole thing, if this one's false, or this one's false, or maybe even both, then this is definitely false. This works as it is. Let's take a look at the next batch, starting with L. All right, let's take a look at the next batch, L through T. I'm skipping M because I don't like it. If you really want to know what I think it is, feel free to write it to me in an email. I just think it's a problem that's so convoluted the way that it's done that we're never going to encounter one like it. So I don't really see it as something that needs to be addressed in here. So if you're really curious, email me and I'll show you what the answer is. It's done in such a way with such an obtuse glossary that I think it's too difficult to follow. So let's start with L, actually. So L says this: we will hire Rachel's or Allison, but not both. Aha! That but not both. What does that mean? Rachel's XOR Allison. That's the answer to this problem. So that's an XOR because it says but not both. Now again, the author of your textbook doesn't use the XOR, but that's what's going on there, that but not both. Now the author of your textbook would put it this way: R wedge A and squiggle R dot A. And I'm going, listen, Howard, that's not well formed, so we're not going to do it. This is the simplest translation of it. Okay? So that's what we're going to do, and it's going to look like that on the quiz. But not both, you treat it like an XOR. One of these two things can't be both of them. Okay? Let's then take a look at N. So this is a quote from Rasputin. Okay? If I die, or you desert me. Okay? If I die, so there's an arrow there. So if I die or you desert me, or both, comma, that means there's the left side of the arrow, then what? You will lose your son and your crown within 6 months. So ends the Romanovs. That one's actually pretty straightforward. All right, so let's take a look at O. O is I don't like the way that it's done here, but it's because it has a glossary. In any of those, I think the author of your textbook is just trying to confuse you. It says this: humans are more closely related to orangutans than they are to chimpanzees or gorillas. Then it gives you a glossary. C stands for human beings are more closely related to orangutans than they are to chimpanzees, and G stands for humans are more closely related to orangutans than they are to gorillas. And the answer is C wedge G, which is they're more closely related to, that is, humans are more closely related to orangutans than chimpanzees, or human beings are more closely related to orangutans than gorillas, or both. Which is I think, a silly way of talking in English. I don't think that's very specific, but that's what's going on here. And sometimes we do use or in this inclusive way where we really do mean and. Okay, like, there's a couple, like, you could say, like, I mean, you're going to wake up today or you're going to go to school. I'm going to do both, and that's obvious. So sometimes we use it in even when we're trying to disjoin two things and make them seem completely separate, sometimes we use ors when it's this but not but this but possibly both thing. We really do use this or as an and in a kind of way. We're just saying, okay, we might do only one of them, but maybe both. And here, I don't think it's helpful in English, but nevertheless, there it is. All right, I absolutely hate this one. If the Braves and Giants both win or both lose. So what does B stand for? They win or lose. What does G stand for? They win or lose. But so then we've got that and there. So really, there's not a disjunction happening here. There's an arrow, and it's saying, this is the way I would translate it as it is. If the Braves win or lose, and the Giants win or lose, then there will be a playoff Monday night in San Francisco. Now, I think that's one way to translate this, and I think that's perfectly legitimate. There's no wedges in here because of the way it's worded. I also would accept here this: if the Braves win or lose, or the Giants win or lose, and possibly both, then there will be a playoff game. Because of how I'm inclined towards this one, but because of the way it's worded, it really could be either one of these. And so that's why I wanted to say again, I want to be really explicit in disjunctions, and I don't like this problem at all, the way that it's done, because I really think it could genuinely be either one of these as it's worded. I think there's ways to make it clearer. Like if I said if they both win and lose, if the Braves both win and lose, and the Giants win and lose, then the playoff games will be Monday. And this one, if they win or lose, if Braves win or lose, or the Giants win or lose, maybe both, then the playoff games will be Monday. Either one of those would be more explicit and make that clearer. Now, this always means this could be in play. Could be. This one does not mean necessarily that it could be in play as such. But that's what's going on here. All right, that's why I don't like this problem. And like I said, when it gets to the quiz, I'm going to give you ones that are much more obvious, I think. All right, let's take a look at Q. This is another one that you might be noticing a pattern here. I don't like. It's got a glossary. I think it's trying to go out of its way to confuse you. It says, neither Amy nor Brian intend. So right there, we got that neither nor language. As soon as you see that, put some parentheses, put that wedge in there, and put a squiggle on the outside. Neither what nor what. Now it's got a glossary. How do I say Amy intended to cause harm to the deceased? That's D. Brian is E. Okay, so neither Amy nor Brian. And then it just has this nor by itself. What does that mean? And not. That's why I warned you about that a little while. And not what? And so there's two ways of, and not what. And they didn't, so we could say neither one of them caused harm. This is one way to put this problem. The other version of this that works is same beginning. Neither this one nor that one decided to cause harm. And she didn't and he didn't. Either one of these I would accept as it is. Okay, these are both just as fine. I think the first half of both of these is easy. Like this part and this part, I think is pretty straightforward. The neither nor, and then after that, nor did they in fact cause harm. And you'll notice here the right sides of both. You could use De Morgan's law and get either way here. And so I typically say translate as is, but I think the way that it's worded is so ambiguous it can be translated either way, and I don't like that. So I'm not going to give you one as unclear as that. Let's take a look at R then. R. Your head shall answer for my son's life, unless he returns safe, or unless I hear that he's alive. Finally. Okay, unless. What do we got? That means whatever follows unless goes on the left side of an arrow with a not in front of it, remember? And look, there's two things here. There's two unlesses, which means there's two things here on the left side of the arrow. What two things? That's what we see. Unless he returns safe, or I hear that he's alive, or both. So if one of these two things doesn't happen, or both, then it's your head. Okay, that makes sense. That one's actually pretty straightforward. S. This one's long, but it's actually pretty straightforward too, I think. Okay, if. So there's an arrow. That's a big problem, so I'm going to go ahead and move the arrow out a bit. If it becomes necessary to pull the equipment off the line for repairs. Or, so there we go, we know it's going to be, I see two things there, so it's going to be a wedge. Or, if an accident saps generating capacity. Alright, so this thing and this thing happens, maybe both. There's that comma, that means here's the then. Then, the company could be forced to reduce power. It could be forced to reduce power, and I see there's two things to the right of that then, or that comma representing then. So they could be forced to reduce power, or black out some sections of the Gold Coast, or both. Maybe both. Alright, fine. And then finally, let's take a look at the last one, T. This is from Plato. It's not particularly worded well. Let's take a look at it. It says unless. There we go. Unless. Whatever follows unless goes on the left side of the arrow with a squiggle in front of it, and there's two things there. So, if what two things don't happen? Philosophers become kings, or kings philosophers. If one of these two things, or both, does not happen, then what? So following that, after that comma, there can be no rest from troubles from states, nor yet for all mankind. So I see two things on the right side of that arrow, so I'm going to go ahead and stick parentheses here. What do we got? There will be no rest for troubles, from troubles for states. So no rest for states. And then we see a nor yet for all mankind. Now I said when you see nor, what do you do? When a nor is by itself, what does it mean? If you had neither nor, that's one thing. If you see nor by itself, what does that mean? You put and then squiggle, whatever follows. So it's a weird construction in English, but nor yet for all mankind. So it's saying and not mankind too. So here's what this is saying. If it's not the case that philosophers become kings, or kings become philosophers, or both, then it's going to be bad for states, that's going to be countries, and it's going to be bad for mankind. It's not going to be good for mankind. Okay? Those are the translations there. Let's move on from here to the batch of number 3 that we see 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D on page 103. All right, let's do 3A with all our rules in play. So this is 3A. We've got squiggle A, wedge B. That would be like saying neither A nor B. And we're trying to get, you can't have both A and B. Okay, so that's what we're going for. So these are the rules that we've got in play at this point. And again, can I do arrow out? Can I do monotones? Can I do double arrow out? Can I do double arrow in? Can I do and out? Should I do and in? Should I do double negation? Should I do wedge in? Can I do wedge out? And then these three are all can and shoulds, and then these are in emergency scenarios. Like I can't do any of the above. I can go for an arrow. I can't do any of the above efficaciously. Go ahead and provisionally assume the opposite of your goal. So there are some things that we can do here with line 1. Like if I'm going down the list, we could do double negation. We could have 3 squiggles on the outside. That doesn't look like it's going to be helpful. I could wedge something random in. I could say all of this or C. That's not going to be helpful. I could do these 3, like De Morgan's Law. Like it might seem like, oh, I should do De Morgan's Law here. Like let me take A, B, turn it into an and then flip all the slots. I get squiggle A, dot squiggle B. That would be De Morgan's law on line 1. That's not that. Those are not the same thing, so that's not really helpful there. Looks like it would be. That would be something definitely to consider. So if I go down this list, the first thing we can do is actually indirect proof. So let's provisionally assume the opposite, contrary of our goal. We're trying to get squiggle A and B. What are we going to do? We're going to take A and B as a provisional assumption for an indirect proof, so we're trying to get any contradiction, any two contraries, and stick them together. That's what we want. So if we go down the list now, what can we do? There's a dot. So yeah, can't do stuff with arrows, can't do stuff with double arrows. There is a dot though. Let's go ahead and break that down. And really we only need one of them to do stuff with. That's and out on line 2 for both. And then we can actually use either one of these to accomplish what we need to do. So when you're trying to build a contradiction, I've said this before, when you're trying to build a contradiction, see, like, are there squiggles that you already have? Yeah, I got squiggle A wedge B. I'll look and see, could I build the opposite or the contrary of that? So if I've got squiggle A wedge B, could I build A wedge B? Yeah, and I have two ways to do it. So in line 5 here, I can get A wedge B, and I can do it two ways, and I don't care which one you do here. We could add a B onto A, in which case that would be a wedge in line 3, or we could add an A onto B, and that would be wedge in line 4. I could just put a 4 here instead. So either way, you're good, all right? Because what you're doing when you add on is it's almost like what you do. It wouldn't be wedge in 3 and 4. You're not combining it that way. The way wedge in works is you say, what did you add it on to? So you have a choice here. You can say you added the B onto A, or you added the A onto B. I don't care which. What this says I added the B onto A. I added it onto line 3. Great. Now look at line 5. It is the contrary of line 1, which means we got our contraries. We just need to make a contradiction. So we say A wedge B and squiggle A wedge B. And that's and in line 5 and line 1. And contradiction is complete, which means we can zoom out and say, yeah, squiggle A dot B is true, because if the opposite were, it would lead to contradictions, and thus 3A is done. Let's take a look at 3B. All right, 3B, we've got C arrow D dot E arrow D, our one and only assumption. We're trying to get C wedge E arrow D. Okay, so let's go down the list. Arrow outs that we can do, no arrows not in parentheses. Arrow outs, motor stolen's not a thing. No double arrows involved. Dots not in parentheses, yep. So let's break that down. That gets us two things. Get C arrow D and E arrow D. Okay, that's and out on line 1 for both. Okay, now, do we have arrows not in parentheses? We sure do. Left side matches? Nope. Right side contraries? Nope. So what do? If we go down the list, we'll find that the only thing, there are 3 things, of course, or not 3, there are 5 things actually we can do. We can always do double negation, we can always do wedge in, we can always do these 3 if we've got the stuff to warrant it. So all 5 of those things we could do, actually 6 if we include and in, we can put them back together again, or and in other things. None of those are viable options right now, in the sense of them being efficacious. They don't lead anywhere. So what should we do? Is our goal an arrow? Yep. Okay, so what do? Line 4. Side quest begins. Provisionally assume the left side of the arrow, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to PA this, and we're going to get this. Okay, so we provisionally assume this, and the goal is we want to get D. That's the goal. So now, let's go down the list. Arrow out. Still, we don't have them by themselves. The letters are there, but we don't have these by themselves. Motor stones, no. Double arrows, no. No dots to take apart. We already did that. We could do this one. Doesn't go anywhere. We could do this one. It doesn't go anywhere. We could do this one. It doesn't go anywhere. Can we do this one? Now, this is a newer move, so I want to remind you of the way it works. What you want to look for when you see this are 3 things for wedge out. So first of all, do I have an or of either kind? Do I have an inclusive or exclusive? Either one. Okay? And then I want to look for 2 more things. Do I have one of the OR parts on the left side of the arrow? And do I have one of the other OR parts also on the left side of the arrow? Okay. Well, do I have that? So that's what we're looking for when we're looking for wedge out. Now, since this is new, that's why I'm kind of zooming in on this one. Well, look, do I have an OR? Yes. Is one of its OR parts also on the left side of the arrow? Yes. Is its other OR part also on the left side of an arrow? Yes. So what does that mean? Well, two possibilities. If the results are dissimilar, that means I can put them together as a wedge. Okay, if they're dissimilar, that is, if I had two different things, I could put them together as a wedge. Are these two different results here? They are not. So the way it works in that situation, if we're going after the same thing, if the things on the right sides are the same, I can just say that thing. Okay, now there's a certain sense in which it's this or this. But if I say like something like, today's Wednesday or today's Wednesday, guess what? Today's Wednesday. All right, so that's what it means. But so yeah, if you've got an or statement, and you got one of the or parts, that technically that's a disjunct. In this case, the sinistral disjunct is also an antecedent. That means the left or part is also on the left side of the arrow. The dextral disjunct, the right part of the or, is itself also an antecedent on another conditional statement. That is, it's also on the left side of another arrow. Then you can, if the results are the same, you can just say the results. You can say, yeah, wedge out, and then what I do there is I cite where was the wedge, where was the left or part on the left side of an arrow, and where was the right or part on the left side of the arrow? And bam, there you go. So what we're going to do is just do that here. Look, so what we can get is we just plug the rule into this. And so here, what corresponds to A wedge B? Well, our or is C wedge E. What corresponds to this? C arrow D. What corresponds to this? E arrow D. So what's the right side of the arrow for both? D, which is what I get. D. How did I get it? Wedge out, and now I just fill in the parts as they fit. Now you can put the numbers in whatever order that you want, but I like to do it in this order. Where was the or that I used? Where was the disjunction? Line 4. Okay. Where was the left or part also on the left side of the arrow? Line 2. Where was the right or part also on the left side of the arrow? Line 3. And bam. So for wedge out, you always need 3 things. Bam, bam, bam. By the way, we were trying to get D, remember? We got it instantly. Bam. So what we can do is we can zoom out immediately and say, yeah, if you got C wedge E, you can get D. Arrow in, 4 through 5. It's still 4 through 5. I know it looks like it should be comma 4, 4, 5. It's still 4 through 5 because that's the way arrow ends work. But this problem is done. 3B is good. All right, let's take a look at 3C. 3C is basically 3B in reverse. We got C wedge E, arrow D. And we're trying to get C arrow D dot E arrow D. All right, now notice what we're trying to solve for is a dot, which I've told you before, and still holds, 99% likelihood last move is going to be an and in. It will be an and in. So knowing that, let's go through the motions. Got an arrow here. Left side match. Nope. Right side contrary. No double arrows. And out. And in. Nope. Double negation. Can, but let's not. Wedge in. Can, but let's not. This is not an option. These are, some of these are options. We could do a material implication. We could do conjunctive conditionality. There's no reason to do that. If it adds a bunch more squiggles and it looks messy, it's not worth doing. Here's what I mean by that. Like conjunctive conditionality, how do you change? You could change this arrow into a dot. And so we could say outside, C wedge E, dot, squiggle D. There you go. Conjunctive conditionality on line 1. I don't see this leading anywhere helpful. So that's why I don't want to do it. It's something that we could do. It's not wrong. But you saw that just added a bunch of squiggles that I don't want to deal with. Okay, is our goal an arrow? No, not exactly. Our goal is a dot, and I told you our last move was going to be an and in. So what would be an and in of? This and this. And so we've done ones like these before. So what I need, 50% of what I need, is C arrow D. And also 50% of what I need would be E arrow D. Now, I don't have either one of these, but they're both arrows. So I think you know how we're going to proceed. Let's PA this and get this as its own side quest. And then let's PA this and get this as its own side quest. And then we'll just pump those results in together and we'll be good to go. So let's start with this one. We're going to go after C arrow D. So what are we going to go for? Well, we're going to provisionally assume the right, C, as a provisional assumption. And we're going to go after D. Okay. Now here with the wedges, this is new, but it's all right. Oh, C. What can I do? Arrow out? Motor solons? No, no. Double arrows? No. And outs? No. And ins? Yeah, but no. Double negation? No. Can I wedge anything in? Well, take a look at the left side of the arrow. The left side of the arrow is C wedge E. Now, the way disjunctions work is if you want to match them, as long as you got one of them, you can just add the other thing on instantaneously. So look, we have C, so we can instantly go C wedge E. Where did the E come from? Narnia, for all I care. What do we add it on to? So the point is when we're doing a wedge in, what did you add it on to? Something that was already established. We added it onto C. So I'm going to say here, this E, we added it onto line 2. It doesn't matter where it came from. Now, you can't just take two nothings and decide to wedge them in together. You can wedge something that came from nowhere onto something that's already established. Okay, that's why I talk about addition as like stapling it on. It's almost like we stapled this E onto C. Now, can I do an arrow out? Yeah. D. Arrow out 1 and 3. Check it out. We were trying to go for D. We got it. So we can say, we can zoom out and say in line 5, yep, C arrow D works. Arrow in, 2 through 4. Now we got another side quest to do. Let's half of what we need is good. What's the other thing we need? We need E arrow D. Let's provisionally assume it. Get the right side. And this is its own separate side quest. So we're going to take E here and provisionally assume that. And the goal here is now also D. Now you might be thinking again, well, but I already got D in line 4. That was its own separate side quest. Okay, so just because you got it here, this stuff's blocked off. This is its own separate side quest. All we're dealing with here is we're dealing with 6 and the stuff on the outside of the side quest. So 1 and 5 you can live with, you can deal with. So E, what can I do? Well, 5's not going to be helpful. 1, look, what am I trying to build? I got half again. When you're trying to build the left side of the arrow and it deals with a wedge, if you got half of it, remember you can wedge in on either side. So what that means in line 7 here we get C wedge E, and this time we're adding the C onto E because you can add on to either side. So we're adding this C onto line 6. Now with this, can we do an arrow out? Yeah. And we get D. And again, you might be thinking, but we already did that. Not in this side quest we did. This is a separate mission. We're using some of the same items in play, but this is a separate mission. So this is a separate mission from this. That's why I like to indent things. It makes it a lot more obvious. So we did that here. How do we get that? This one is arrow out 1, which is in play because it's outside of the side quest, 1 and 7. Okay, this side quest is now complete. We went from E to D. So what can we do? We can zoom out and say line 9. Yeah, E arrow D is also a thing. Arrow in this case, 6 through 8. And now look, we have this side quest and this side quest, but look at the actual proof. Look at 1, 5, and 9. Oh, it's saying we can go from 1 to 5 and 9. That's actually what the conclusion is. The conclusion is line 5 and line 9. So what we do is just add those in. Look, C arrow D and E arrow D and in, which I said that's going to be the last move because we got this other thing too, and in 5 and 9. Problem's done. Okay, let's take a look at 3D. Now 3D is painful because it does something that is rough to figure out. We've got F wedge G dot H, and we want to get F wedge G. Seems straightforward enough. Looks like we're just taking the and H out in a certain manner of speaking. Yeah, that's kind of true. We're just kind of taking the H off. But the process to do that is surprisingly troublesome. So just like in the last problem, where we had to do stuff, we kind of had to figure things out backwards. We had to do some, reverse engineering to figure it out. This one also involves reverse engineering, and it involves reverse engineering with ORs. So, when you're going through, like, arrow out, modus tollens, double arrow out, double arrow in, no. And out, no, that thing's in parentheses. And in, no. Double negation, again, you can. Wedge in, that's not going to lead you anywhere. Wedge out. Well, we got a wedge. We're going to come back to that one, actually. We got a wedge, but we don't have this on the left side of the arrow. We don't have this on the left side of the arrow. De Morgan's Law, again, we could. That's going to lead to a lot of squiggles. Material implication. Yeah, you could do that. You could turn this into squiggle F, arrow, G.H. Yeah, material implication, you're good to go. You can do it. It's not helpful. Is our goal an arrow? No. No, that's not helpful. Can we do an indirect proof? So can we provisionally assume the opposite of our goal? So squiggle F, wedge G. Okay, provisional assumption for an indirect proof. Can we do that? Yeah. That's not going to be helpful. So it seems like we're kind of stuck. Now, this problem is solvable, but you have to think about it in a way that you perhaps haven't thought about before. The thing I want to focus in on is when it seems like nothing is viable, like it doesn't seem like anything's going to go anywhere, look and see, are one of the pieces that I have to start with, is it an OR? Yes. So this is kind of a new thing to think about. Okay, do I have an OR? All right, I do. Now, if you got an OR, and you can prove that you can construct a wedge out from it, you're good. Now you might be thinking, well, I don't have this on the left side of the arrow, and I don't have this on the left side of the arrow. Well, that's okay, because think about this pattern. So one of the redundant edge wedge out pattern is this. If you got this, okay, either kind of OR, and you got one of the OR parts on the left side of the arrow, and you got one of the other OR parts on the left side of the arrow, then you can just say those right sides are, that's what that you can get it. So if they're the same thing, you can just say that. And that's actually what we're going to do here. So take a look at what we've got here, and we're going to fill it in with this. Like, so we're going to go after F wedge G with this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to play around like, if this model is the case, we're going to play around like this is A, this is B, and this is C in the model. So we're going to do exactly that. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, so, okay, we're going to take this and we're going to plug the values in what we would need to get. So if do we have an OR? Yes, we do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mirror what this would look like in this problem. We have an OR. We have F wedge G.H. Okay, following this pattern, okay, if this corresponds to this, what would A arrow C correspond to? Well, it would be the left side of the OR arrow, the thing you're trying to solve for. Okay, so what would that be? F arrow F wedge G. Now again, this is the mirror of this. It's the left side of your OR, arrow, the thing that you want to get. Okay, now what I want to figure out is what would this correspond to? So this would be, what's the right side of our OR? G.H. Arrow, what's our goal? F wedge G. Alright, so look. Now if I had these three parts, okay, wedge out, look, I've got this or this or this. This thing leads to F or G. This thing leads to F or G, so I'd be able to say here, F wedge G. In fact, I could say that line 4, wedge out, en deux, trois. I could totally say that. Now, do I have this? Yeah. Do I have either one of these? No. But what are they? Arrows. So how do I prove arrows? Arrow in. So if I can prove these two, then I can get this with a wedge out. Let's give it a try. Okay, so let's start with this arrow. Let's see if I can build this arrow. So line 2, I'm going to say F as a provisional assumption, and I'm going to go after F wedge G. Okay, which is the right. So I'm going to provisionally assume this, and I'm going to try and get this. Okay, can I do it? All right, so I've got F now. Could I get F wedge G? Very easily. Look, I could just add the G on to the F. Wedge in, line 2. And this arrow is now done. Look, I zoom out. If I got F, I can totally get to F wedge G. Arrow in 2 through 3. And look, that arrow's done. I did it very quickly. Let's do the other one. So zoom in a level, line 5. Let's start with G.H. And what we're going to do is we're going to go after also F wedge G. That's the goal. We're going to try and get that thing. Alright, so now with the G.H in play, look, I got a dot there that I can break apart. G.H. And out on line 5 for both. I'm actually not even going to need the H. Look. Can I get to F wedge? Remember, I'm going after F wedge G. Can I get it? Look, I have half of one of the things that I need. What am I going to do? I'm just going to add an F onto G. Where did the F come from? With the way wedge in works, as long as you got one of the pieces, you can staple the other thing on. So look, line 8, F wedge G. Wedge in, line 6 this time, because I'm adding the F onto the G. Look, I did it. I got F wedge G. So I can zoom out and I can say, line 9, yeah, if you got G.H, you can totally get to F wedge G. Arrow in, 5 through 8. And here's where things get really maddening. Look, now I got this other thing that I needed. So here's the deal. Look at this pattern. If you got an OR statement, which I do right here in line 1, this or this, F wedge G and H, and you have one of the OR pieces on the left side of the arrow. So look, the OR piece here is F. Do I have an F somewhere on the left side of the arrow? Right there. And you have the other OR piece on the left side of an arrow. So the other OR piece in line 1 was G.H. Do I have that on the left side of the arrow somewhere? Right there. And then what you can do is you can get the right sides of those arrows. If they're different, you can put them together as a wedge. But look, they're the same. So what does that mean? Line 10, I can just say F wedge G. How? Wedge out. Where was the OR? Line 1. Where was the left side OR part on the left side of the arrow? Look, there's a map. Look, there's F, line 4. Where was the right OR part on the left side of an arrow? Line 9. This problem is done. So we had to think backwards to complete the dilemma, but we were able to figure out the problem this way. So this one's a bit convoluted. We have to think a little bit backwards, but it works this way. Okay, let's take a look at some of the other translations into proofs that continue on page 104. Let's start with number 5. All right, now let's take a look at number 5. So number 5 says this. Either Busalis or Orr will win the election for the governor of Nebraska. Now you might think that's an XOR, but again, if it doesn't explicitly say but not both, just take it as an inclusive OR. So that would be Busalis or, that's wedge in the sense of order, Busalis or, unfortunate choice of names here. Okay. So Busalis or, and it could be both because you could have a tie in the election. Okay. Now, so we've got that one. That's line 1. Line 2. If Busalis wins, Nebraska will have its first female governor. If Orr wins, Nebraska will have its first female governor. So solve for Nebraska will have its first female governor. Let's go through it. Arrow out? Nope. Motor Solons? Nope. Okay. Although we do have arrows here, no left side matches, no right side contraries. And out? No. And in? You can, but it doesn't go anywhere. Double negation? You can, doesn't go anywhere. Wedge in? No, I don't need to add on a wedge. Wedge out. Now again, this one's new. So what you look for in a wedge out is, first of all, do you have an OR statement of either kind? XOR or inclusive OR. Okay, and then also, so this is what you want to look for when you're looking for a wedge out. Look for an OR statement of some kind, and then look for one of the OR parts on the left side of an arrow, and the other OR part on the left side of the arrow. So you want to see the disjuncts themselves as antecedents in their respective conditional statements. Said a little more technically. Do we have that phenomenon going on here? Do we have an OR statement? Yeah, line 1. Okay, great. Is one of the OR parts on the left side of the arrow of an arrow? Yep. Is the other OR part, the other disjunct itself, on the left side of an arrow? Yep. Well, then what you can do then, you can take the results and put them together. Now, if the results are identical, because it'd be a tautology, that is, it'd be like super, super obvious. This is the same thing as saying, oh, C wedge C, which again, you don't even need to put that. You can put that if you really want to. We just get C. So in this case, it would be, what's going to happen is, if Busalis wins, Busalis or OR is going to be elected governor. If Busalis wins, it's going to have its first female governor. If OR wins, it's going to have its first female governor. So what do we know? Nebraska is going to have its first female governor, period. No matter which route you take, it leads to here. So if I did a diagram of this, I could even put it this way. So look, Busalis is going to win, or OR is going to win. Okay? If Busalis wins, Nebraska has its first female governor. If OR wins, Nebraska has its first female governor. So this is happening no matter what, and that's all this is doing here. This problem is actually trying to solve that. That is wedge out, and I just put, where were these three pieces? Here, it's really obvious here, just lined up just right. Un, deux, trois. 1, 2, 3. There it is. Let's take a look now at number 6. Okay, let's now take a look at number 6. So we've got A and B. We want to get C wedge A, wedge D. Now, a lot of wedges here, not wedges to start. And also I see different letters here, different constituent components that aren't even over here. So it looks like some wedge ins are probably going to be what's going to happen. So yeah, if you got wedge something, and you don't see that to start with, you're probably literally adding that stuff on with addition. That's wedge in. So let's go down the list. No stuff with arrows we don't need to worry about. No stuff with double arrows. And out. Yep. There's a dot there. Let's cleave it in twain. That gets us these two things. And out on line 1 for both. Then arrow out, no. Motor Solons, no. Double arrows, no. And out, already did it. And in. That's not going to get you anywhere. Double negation, no squigglage here whatsoever. Doesn't help you. Wedge in. Yeah. So look, all we need, we've got this thing. So all we're going to have to do is wedge this on, and then wedge this onto that. Watch this. So yeah, if you find yourself stuck, and then you look and see, okay, do I have wedges in the final result? See if these are things that you can just attach. So watch this. I'm going to add or attach the C onto the A. So that's a wedge in onto line 2. Almost like I stapled this C onto A. Now this is its own thing that I'm going to then attach the D onto. Watch this. So I've got C wedge A, and I'm going to go wedge D. That's a wedge in on line 4. And we're done. Now let's take a look at number 7. All right, number 7 is one of those where knowing the rules and knowing them well and having this list makes things much easier. So I'm going to go ahead and say this. Now, with a lot of the problems up to this point, there have been multiple ways to do them. That's the case here, too. There are multiple ways to do them. I'm going to go over 2, and I'm going to show you why you want to make sure you go through that list exhaustively to make sure. Is there anything I can do to make my life easier? So here's what we got. we've got squiggle E wedge squiggle F, and we want to get squiggle E dot F. Okay. Neither E nor not F. We're going to end up with not E and F. Okay, now, if you just quickly go down the list and do an arrow out, no, monotones, no, double arrow out, no, and out, no, and in, no, double negation, no, that doesn't change that into that. Wedge in, nope, wedge out, nope, and then we've got these three options. Okay, De Morgan's law, well, I can change any one of these. Material implication, conjunctive, conditionality, any of these I want to do, okay? And what you want to look for, especially, is would it be advantageous to turn these things into something else? So De Morgan's law, if you want to turn a wedge into an and, give that a go. Material implication, you want to turn a wedge into an arrow, vice versa for all of these. And conjunctive conditionality, do you need to turn an arrow into an and, or vice versa? Well, what do we have here? Well, let's try De Morgan's law out. That allows us to turn a wedge into a dot. Okay? Let's see if that works. Let's see what that, because look, we got a wedge here, we got a dot here. Maybe it'll end up being the same thing. So keep the letters exactly as they are. Change the symbol. So we're going to change this to a dot instead of a wedge. And then what you do to do a De Morgan's law is you just completely flip the negation slots. So if they're on, you're going to deactivate them. If they're off, we're going to activate them. So the outside is on, we're going to turn it off. Left is off, we're going to turn it on. Right is on, we're going to turn it off. And so we did this, De Morgan's law, line 1, and look. We actually just got our goal because of De Morgan's law. Knowing De Morgan's law, so knowing these shortcuts here, these conversions, saves you a lot of time. I say it saves you a lot of time because imagine you didn't have these, how would you solve this problem? So now I'm going to do an alternate version of this problem where you don't have De Morgan's law at your disposal. So now I'm going to do another version of this problem where you don't have De Morgan's law at your disposal. What does it look like? So we could say this is version 1, and this is really what you should do. Let's look at version 2. Watch how this goes. Okay, so it's possible without it. Okay, so that's our assumption. Same goal. What do? Well, if you don't have these, and you go down this list, it doesn't look like you can do anything, but since the goal is a dot, if you don't do De Morgan's law, and you do this proof the long way, I'm going to say the hard way, and you see we've got a dot as the goal, well, your last move then is going to be a and in. It will be. And that means you would need to get two things. In order for the last move to be an and in, and you put them together, remember when your goal is a dot, that's probably what's going to happen. It is here if you don't do De Morgan's law. Again, you can be done in one step if you just know to recognize stuff like that. But otherwise, if you have to go the long way, watch all you got to do. You need two things. You need squiggle E and you'd need F by themselves. Right? So this is a goal that you need to get, and this is a goal that you need to get. Do we have either one of those? Nope. So what would you do to get these? They're not arrows. Go down the list. Okay, if we're going to try and reverse engineer these, we would need to do indirect proof for each one. So let's do that. Let's try and get this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and provisionally assume E, the contrary, a squiggly, and I'm starting an indirect proof, so I'm after a contradiction. Now look for, when you're trying to look for a contradiction, look and see, is there something I already got that I can build the contrary of? Actually, yeah. So look, and look where you'll have squiggles on the outside. All right, somewhere in the line, or see if you got squiggles either on the outside or on the left of something. It's real easy for me to build a contrary to this because I can just add a squiggle F onto E. Okay, that's a wedge in on line 2. And now look at line 3 and line 1. They're contraries. Okay, so now look, they're hefty, but look, this and the exact same thing with a squiggle in front of it. So that's a contradiction. And that, remember, the last move in indirect proof within the subproof is the and in, the putting together of the contraries. So what pieces do we put together there? 3 and 1. That means I can say, yep, squiggle E is a thing. Okay. Indirect proof, 2 through 4. Look, now 50% of what I need is done. What's the other thing I need? I need to get F. So if I need to get F, I'm going to provisionally assume its contrary, which is going to be squiggle F. Provisional assumption for an indirect proof. So I want a contradiction here too. But remember, the stuff 2 through 4 was its own separate subproof side quest, so it's off limits. So what I can actually do here, the method is going to be very similar. Remember, the only things in play for the subproof are 1, 5, and 6. Okay, the subproof and then the stuff that's outside in the regular proof, 1 and 5, 2 through 4 off limits. Well, I've still got this in play, and actually I can just build the contrary just like I did here in this subproof, just the other way. I'm going to add an E onto this squiggle F on the left side. Look, so E, wedge, squiggle F. Now this time what I'm doing here, what I did before, is I added a squiggle F onto E and got this. This time what I'm doing is I'm adding an E onto squiggle F. So that's a wedge in on line 6. And then this is the contrary of line 1 for this subproof. So I can just go E, wedge, squiggle F. And the exact same thing with a squiggle in front of it. Now again, you might be thinking, oh, I already had that in line 4. That was in this version. This is in a different side quest, subproof. Okay, it doesn't apply here. Okay, so that's and in this case, 7 and 1. Okay, and now we've been able to say indirectly, okay, yeah, F is true. Okay, indirect proof, 6 through 8. And now what can we do? We got the other thing that we needed. So now we can just and in lines 5 and 9. And what do we get? Squiggle E and F and in 5 and 9. And the proof is done. Now look, this took 10 steps. Now it's not, I don't think this is the most ridiculous proof ever, but which would you rather do? This 10-step version or the 2-step version right here? Like if this one, you do this and you're done, and it works. That's why knowing these and looking out, can I do these? Or it would be helpful. Well, yeah, it really here it's helpful because it made the proof done instantly instead of having to do all this. Now this proof here actually zooms in on this, showing that it works. Okay, but I would much rather do this than this. So make sure you know these and you can look out for them. Otherwise, you end up spending a lot more time doing proofs than you should be. And actually, after this set of quizzes, like the quiz 8 is going to be a quiz where the goal is to learn a bunch of shortcuts to try and slice through these things much more quickly. Now, however, we're going to take a look at problem number 8 on 105. All right, let's take a look at number 8. Okay, what we've got here, that's on page 105. Dennis's in-court statement contradicted the story he told the state attorney. Okay, well, so we've got all that is just C. Assumption number 1. All right. 2. If this is so, well, if what is so. So we know that what we just said on the left side of an arrow. If that is so, then what? Then he either lied to the jury. So here's what's on the right side of the arrow. He either lied to the jury or to the state attorney, or perhaps both. So that's letting you know one or the other, not an XOR. Okay, that's why I said that. Or perhaps both. Let's take a look at line 3. Provided that he lied to the jury. All right, so provided that means if he lied to the jury, then he did not cooperate with the state. Assumption number 3. 4. And, now since the sentence starts with and, we can ignore it. And if he lied to the state's attorney, then he also did not cooperate with the state. Assumption number 4. All right, and there's actually a 5th assumption here in the way that I'm going to translate this. There's a way that it might be something else, but since the next sentence says since, that makes it sound like here's another reason. So since Dennis's cooperating with the state is a necessary condition. All right, so there's an arrow, and his cooperating with the state would be on the right side of the arrow. Okay, since his cooperating with the state was a necessary condition for dropping the charge of murder. So a necessary condition for what? Not being charged with murder. Well, because of that, Okay, again, I don't like the way this one is in the book. Therefore, the state will charge him with murder. Okay? So, now with that in play, let's go about our business. So, arrow out. First of all, do we have any arrows not in parentheses? Yeah, we've got 4 of them. Any left side matches? Yeah, 2 and 1. What does that do? Unlocks J, wedge, A. Okay, that's arrow out, 2 and 1. Now, can we do another arrow out? No. Modus tollens? No. There's no double arrows here, so I don't need to worry about that. Any dots I can break apart? No. Any and ins to make? No. Double negations? No. Wedge in? No. There's an M over here eventually, so I don't need to worry about that. Wedge out. Remember, what you look for in a wedge out is, do you have an or statement? We do. And I guess I should say not in parentheses. So look, there's our or statement. Now look at the left or part, the left disjunct. Is it on the left side of an arrow somewhere too? Yep. Okay, so now look at the other or part, the other disjunct. Is this disjunct also on the left side of another arrow somewhere? Yep. So what that means is you can take those 2 results and say this thing, or if they're identical, you can just say, okay, that thing, and they are identical. So what that means is we're going to get with a wedge out, just squiggle S. How so? Wedge out, 6, 3, and 4. Okay, so what this is saying is J is going to happen or A is going to happen, maybe both. If J happens, it leads to squiggle S. If A happens, it leads to squiggle S. So no matter which one of these happens, or both of them do, squiggle S is happening. That's what we just said. Now, can we do an arrow out? Nope. Can we do modus tollens? Yeah. Look at line 5. The right side of the arrow is S. We just got squiggle S. What that means is, since the way modus tollens works, if you got an arrow and you got the contrary of the right side, you get the contrary of the left side of that arrow. So what would be the contrary of squiggle M? And really, there's 2 options you've got here. You could say squiggle M. Okay, but when you're making deductions like this, you can also just say the contrary of squiggle M. I believe it's intuitive that the contrary of squiggle M is M. If you really wanted to, you could put squiggle M and then double negate it. But look, we've got that. Modus tollens, 5 and 7. Number 8 is done. All right, the next one I want to do is number 11. Now, if you're interested in what 9 and 10 are, I'll probably post them on Blackboard, but they're not really very interesting translations, and they're not problems I would give you. Like, number 10 has a suppressed premise where it doesn't even tell you everything that should be there, and you kind of have to figure it out, and I'm not going to do that to you, so I don't really want to even do a problem like it. So let's take a look at number 11, which is on page 106, and this is from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. So let's take a look at line 1 here. The cake will make me either larger or smaller. Now, you might think there, well, shouldn't that be an exclusive disjunction? It's going to do one or the other. It didn't explicitly say so, so unless it explicitly says so, and the author of your book doesn't do it anyway, but unless it explicitly says so, you would put in an inclusive disjunction. Okay. 2, if it makes me larger, then I can reach the key, but that's not done. There's a semicolon there, which means this stuff is grouped together. And if it makes me smaller, then I can creep under the door. Assumption number 2. Okay. Assumption number 3. If I can reach the key, then I'll get into the garden. Another semicolon. And if I can creep under the door, I'll get into the garden. And it says so, that means here's what you're solving for. Either way, I'm going to get into that garden. Alright, this is what we got in play. Arrows not in parentheses? Nope. So Arrow out, monotone is not a thing. Double arrows here? Nope. Dots? Yep, 2 sets. So I can break apart. Doesn't matter which one I do first. Nope, but I like to start from the top. So I'm going to say here, we got L arrow K and S arrow C. And that's an and out on line 2 for both. Okay, and since I already know that I can break out this other one, and there are actually 2 things I could do right now, but I'm going to go ahead. The next thing on my if I go down the list is that other one in line 3. Let me go ahead and break that apart. Okay, that gets me K arrow G and C arrow G. And out on line 3 for both of those. Okay, now go down the list. Do I have arrows not in parentheses? Actually, now I do. Now I have 4. Okay, but do I have the left side matches for any of them? I do not. Do I have right side contraries for any of them? I do not. No more double arrows, no more dots to slash apart. I can make some and-ins, but that's not going to get me anywhere to getting just G by itself. Double negation, there's no squiggles here. That's not going to help me get to G by itself. Wedge in, again, not a wedge. That's not going to help me. Wedge out, well, again, what you look for there is, first of all, do I have an or statement of some kind, inclusive or exclusive? I do. I have that in line 1. Okay. Then what you want to do is look for each of these respective disjuncts. Is it also on the left? Are each of these on the left side of their own arrow somewhere? So look at L. Look for, is L on the left side of an arrow somewhere? Yep. Okay. Now look for S. Is S on the left side of an arrow somewhere? Yep. And what that means is you can take the results of those and put them together as a wedge. I'm going to put this over here as a diagram. So here's what's happening. L or S is happening. If L happens, then K is going to happen. And if S happens, then C is going to happen. So you can think of it as like you have a choice of going down these 2 slides. This slide leads here. This slide leads here, which means this thing's going to happen or this thing's going to happen. And because it's inclusive, maybe both. Maybe, like if you think of it as like slides at like a playground, you can go down this slide and then, walk over to the other one and then go down that slide. And that's how you could say, but maybe both. So this is actually the result that we get here. In line 8, we can say K wedge C, wedge out, and then you just list where was that piece, okay, the disjunction, then where was this arrow, and then where was this arrow, okay, where were those pieces? Well, that wedge, the or that we used, the disjunction we used was in line 1, where its left disjunct was on the left side of an arrow was in line 4, and where its right disjunct was on the left side of an arrow was in line 5. Okay, let's go down the list again. Now with this new wedge here. Arrow outs, or solons, nope, nope. Double arrow out, double arrow in, nope, nope, nope. And out, already did that. And in, nah, nowhere helpful. Double negation, again, not helpful. Wedge in, nothing to build. That situation hasn't changed. But look, when it comes to wedge out, we just did one. But look this time. I've got a wedge now. Okay, so what I'm going to look for, I've got an or statement. Look and see, is this on the left side? Is the left disjunct itself on the left side of an arrow somewhere? Yup. Is the other disjunct itself also on the left side of another arrow somewhere? Yup. So here's what's going on in this situation. It's very much like this, except it's the redundant kind. So look, think of it like you got a choice. This is happening or this is happening. If K happens, it leads to G. If C happens, it also leads to G. So either one of, no matter what way you take, it's going to lead to the same place. Okay? No matter which way you go, it's going to lead to the same place. So what you can just say there is you can just say G, which is what we wanted to get. How did we get it? Well, wedge out. Where was the K wedge C? That was in line 8. Where was the arrow where K was on the left side, leading to G? That was in line 6. Where was the other one, where C leads to G? That's in line 7. Now again, when it comes to these, I put 8, 6, 7 here and 1, 4, 5 because that's the order of the pattern of the model of the rule. But as long as you get the right numbers, you can put 5, 4, 1, 6, 7, 8. I don't care. Okay, as long as it's the correct numbers, I don't care the order of the numbers. But mine is corresponding to where you find the first number I'm putting is what's the disjunction. The second one I'm putting is where is the left disjunct as a left side of an arrow. And then the third thing I'm putting is where is the right disjunct on the left side of an arrow. That's the order, or that's how I'm ordering my numbers. Let's take a look now at number 12. Here's what we got. If I talk about others, okay, so there's an if, that means that, hey, line 1 here is going to be an arrow. So let's see, at least so far. If I talk about others, Andy thinks I'm a gossip. Comma, and, which means that's together, dot, and. If I talk about myself, he thinks I'm a bore. Okay, assumption number 1. Okay, assumption number 2. If I talk to Andy, so if I talk to Andy, I talk to Andy on the left side of the arrow. If I talk to Andy, I talk either about others or myself, maybe both. Assumption number 2. Hence, so here's what we're solving for. If I talk to Andy, so there's an arrow. If I talk to Andy, he thinks I'm a gossip or a bore. Okay. Translation is done. Let's do the work of the proof. So first of all, do we have an arrow not in parentheses? Yes, we do. Left side match? Nope. Right side contrary? No. Double arrows? No. A dot I can break apart? Yeah, let's do that then. That gets me this in lines 3 and 4, respectively. We get O arrow G and M arrow B. That's and out on line 1 for both. Okay, can I do another arrow out? Bonus Tollens? Double arrow out, double arrow in? No, 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 no. And out? No. And in? No. Double negation? No. Wedge in? Sure, but I don't need to. Everything that's here is over there. Wedge out? No, I don't even have an OR statement by itself. Any of these helpful? Not that I can see. Like, we can do a lot of these. And, like, for example, we could turn line 3 into a wedge if we wanted to. We could be like, oh, I'm going to use material implication to turn line 3 into squiggle O wedge G. Sure, that would be material implication on line 3. You could do that, and now you've got an OR statement, but do you have squiggle O on the left side of it? No, you don't. So that one doesn't go anywhere. So as long as we have the requisite parts, we can always do these. Okay? So let's take a look now at what would be next on our list. Let's see, can we do an arrow in? Is our goal an arrow? It is. So we're going to end up provisionally assuming this, trying to get the right side over here. So let's go ahead and set that up. So line 5, we're starting a side quest. A as a provisional assumption, but this time for an arrow in, which means we're specifically trying to get G wedge B. We get that, we actually have the goal. So that's the mission, get G wedge B. So, that being said, since it's got a wedge in there, one of two things is going to happen, most likely. Probably going to be doing a wedge in or a wedge out at some point. There are exceptions to that. Okay, for example, if we had, something like A arrow G wedge B as an assumption, and then I also had an A, well then I could get G wedge B without needing to do a wedge out or a wedge in. We would just be doing an arrow out there. So I say that as a possibility. Probably not going to happen here. So let's see, now with this A in play, can we do an arrow out? Yeah, we do. We have a left side match way back from line 2. So that gets us O wedge M. That's arrow out, 2 and 5. Okay, go down the list. Arrow out, nope. Bonus Tollens, nope. Double arrows, no. And outs, no. And in, no. Double negation, no. Wedge in, again, we could do it to anything. I could say A wedge Q, but there's no reason to do that. Okay, oh, but for wedge out, okay, I have a new fresh wedge here. So look here. So I got a wedge, I got an OR statement. Look at, all right, let's take one of the OR parts. Is it on the left side of an arrow somewhere? Yup. Look at the other or part. Is it on the left side of an arrow somewhere? Yup. So what does that mean? You can get the results as a wedge too. So here's what's happening. I'm going to extract out the model of what's going on. Either O is happening or M is happening, maybe both. If O happens, then G is going to happen. That's where that slide leads. If M happens, then B is going to happen, which means one of these two things is going to happen. G or B, maybe both. So let's just say that, line 7, we can just say G, wedge, B, and that would be wedge out, and then we just say, okay, where was the original disjunction that we used? Line 6. Where was this part, the left disjunct on the left side of an arrow? 3. Where was the other disjunct on the left side of an arrow? Line 4. Okay, that's good, which means we have completed the subproof, mission complete. We've originally seen the left. We got the right, which means we have proven if you got A, then it will lead to G wedge B. How so? Arrow in 5 through 7. And this problem is now done. Let's take a look at then our next one, which would be number 13. Okay, now we're just going to take a look at number 13 on page 106. This one says, prove that F2 entails F1, and it's these bits here. Now later on, there's actually going to be a move that allows us to do this problem in one move. But we don't have access to that yet, so here's what we got to do. We got to figure out how we're going to do it based on what we know now. So this one seems intuitive to me too. Like I've got A dot B wedge A dot C, and I want to get A dot B wedge C. It's kind of like if I said like today's Friday and we're going to dinner, or today's Friday we're going to the movies, is a long-winded way of saying, hey, today's Friday and we're going to dinner or the movies, maybe both. Okay, that makes sense to me. Arrow out. Nope. Motor stolons? Nope. No arrows, no double arrows, no dots that I can break apart here because these are in parentheses. Double negation, not worth doing. Wedge in, all the letters are still there. Wedge out, no, but I do have a wedge here. And I'm going to go ahead and say, strangely enough, and this is what I want you to look out for in on this quiz too. We'll do a couple more practice ones like this. I'm going to go ahead and say this now. The solution to this problem, the last move is a wedge out. And one of the lines in that wedge out is line 1. So this is one where we have to basically reverse engineer a dilemma in order to get this to work. All right, so let's review the parts that we need for a dilemma or a wedge out. Now usually in my models I use A's and B's for the models. Now since there's A's and B's in this problem, I'm going to use X's and Z's instead. Okay, but the actual formula here is all the same. So what do you need to to do a wedge out? You need 3 pieces. Okay, 3 things. What you need? You need a disjunction of some kind. Okay, it could be exclusive or inclusive. And again, I'm using X's and Z's so I don't mix them up with A's and B's in the actual problem. Okay, so you need that. You need a disjunction of some kind, whether it be exclusive or inclusive. You need one of the disjuncts to also be on the left side of an arrow, and you need the other disjunct to be on the left side of an arrow. Okay, you got this criteria, you're good. Now, what you can get, all right, as a result of this pattern, like if you've got this criteria met, and this is really all you need to do a wedge out. The only difference is what's on the right side of the arrows. So if you get 2 different things on the right side of an arrow, let's say we get W and Y, then you can stick them together as a disjunction. Sure, you can do that. Or if it's the same thing on both right sides of the arrows, you just get that thing. Okay? This is actually an optimal pattern for us to know. Okay? In what way? We can, again, what we're going to do is I'm going to leave this model here, and we're going to take a look at our applied model and see what would this model look like with the values that I have so far. Okay, so first of all, the first thing, let's start with this one. Okay, I would need an or statement. Do I have an or statement? Yeah. Let's go ahead and mark that down here. What do we got? We got A and B, wedge A dot C. So what's going on here is this A dot B is corresponding to what I have as X in the model. Okay, so this is X, so to speak, in the model. And this A dot C jazz that I got down here is corresponding to Z in the model. So if that model is true, then I can also figure out what arrows I would need. Okay, for this arrow, what would I need on the left side? It would be A dot B, arrow something. And what would this arrow be? A dot C, arrow something. Okay, now let's talk about what that something is. Now, I just said if the right side does right sides of those arrows, if you've got all this stuff, okay, this disjunction and one of the disjuncts on the left side of an arrow and the other disjunct on the left side of an arrow, if you've got the same stuff on the right sides of those arrows, you can just say, yep, that. Well, what do we want to yep that? Here, look, the goal for the whole thing. If we stuck this on the right side of those arrows, and then we get all this stuff, we're good to go. Is that possible? Well, I know it is, because I've done this problem. But it might not seem obvious, so I'm going to put the same thing, like our actual conclusion, on the right side for both. And look, if I have these three things, then I could just say, line 4, I could totally just say, I could just say A dot B wedge C. Okay, wedge out, lines wedge right, 1, 2, 3. That'd be good. Now, do I have any of these? I have this one, so I'm at 33% completion. Do I have these two? No, I do not. But they're both arrows, and I know a method for proving arrows. So let's take the left side of that arrow, and that's going to be A dot B. That's a provisional assumption, and the mission here is to get the following thing. We want to get A dot B wedge C. All right, that's the goal. Get that, we're good. Okay, so now we go about our business. Okay, no arrows, no double arrows, but I can slice apart these dots. In fact, I get A and B respectively, and out on line 2 for both. Okay, and actually I can get the B wedge C here real quick. Look, B wedge C. I just added the C onto that B. Okay, so yeah, if you find yourself in a situation where you're stuck, how do I get that or? See if you got something you can tack it onto. All you need is the one thing to tack it onto and you're good to go. That's wedge in, and you say what you added it onto, line 4. So check it. Now we can say line 6, A and B wedge C. We're just anding it in. Look, line 3, line 5, stick it together. And mission complete. We did it. That means we can zoom out here and say, yeah, it's true. If you start with A dot B, you can totally get our goal, A dot B wedge C. Arrow in, 2 through 6. Totally say that. Now look, that means we are 2/3 of the way for what we need to do a wedge out and be done with this problem. So again, we're building a wedge out. Okay, but now we got to get this one. So this one, almost the exact same method, just a different provisional assumption, and that is A dot. Okay, so let's go ahead, provisionally assume the left side here. This is going to be A dot C, provisional assumption for getting the same right side, B wedge C. Okay, we're going after this. We're going after this whole thing. Again, the methodology is similar. We slice this, and that gets us A and C respectively, and out on line 8 for both. Okay, and now look, we have the A. The other thing we need is B wedge C. This time we have the C. We're going to add a B onto it. B wedge C. Wedge in. We added that on to line 10. And now look, we just stick them together. A dot B wedge C. Now you might be thinking, hey, we already got that in line 6. But as a reminder, for each separate indirect proof, this has to be a separate process. Okay, so you have to do it individually each time, and the stuff that's going on in the other side quests or subproofs, right? You can think of them as completely separate games. Okay, you can't use pieces. You can't use clue pieces in Monopoly and vice versa, or so forth. This is a completely different game, or this is a different save file, depending on how you want to look at it. Okay, using video game metaphors. So, but we did it here as well. Okay, and that was and in this case, lines 9 and 11 for those pieces. And then we can zoom out here and say, yeah, this is a thing too. If you got A dot C, okay, it will lead you as well to A dot B wedge C. It works. Arrow in. 8 through 12. And look now, we got our 3 lines. They're all done. Which means we can do a wedge out now. So look at this. So here's what's going on. Look, here's what's going on. We've got this or this. If this happens, it leads to this, our goal. If the other thing happens, it leads to this, our goal. And since one of these two things is happening, maybe both, our goal is happening, which is why we can say in line 14, yep, A dot B wedge C, it's happening. Wedge out. Where was the or? So where's the line that looks like this? Line 1. Where's the line that looks like this? Line 7. And where's the line that looks like this? 13. This problem is done. Now there are several ways to do this problem. Based on what we know now, this is the most efficient way to do it. Based on what you know now. Like I said, there will be something kind of like De Morgan's Law that will allow us to switch between this and this in one move. We don't know it yet. Or I haven't revealed it yet, but that will be something that you'll do on quiz 8. So you can do it this way when we get to quiz 8, or you can find a way that's more efficient to move between these two. But this also demonstrates or literally proves that it works. Okay, at least in this direction. All right, let's do number 14, page 107. From Le Mort d'Arthur, The Death of King Arthur. Line 1. We're doing some translating here. The fellowship of knights continues only if both Lancelot and I live. Okay? So, this is a classic only if. So, the fellowship continues only if, bam, put that arrow down. Both, two things happening. Lancelot lives, and I live. And the I talking is Arthur, and it tells us beneath the problem. That would be A for Arthur lives. That's assumption number 1. Okay? Assumption number 2. But at least one of us will die. Not as clear as I would like, but basically either Lancelot will not live or Arthur will not live. Possibly both of them won't live. Okay? So that's assumption number 2. And what are we to solve for? We are to solve for this. Therefore, the fellowship will not continue. Squiggle F. Okay, so that's what we're solving for. And this is one where knowing some of the shortcuts and being able to recognize them will save you a bit of time. So let's, basically there's at least 2 ways to solve this problem. I'm going to do it the long way first. Okay, so we got an arrow. Can I do an arrow out? No. But then you might immediately see, but I have my going for squiggle F. If I provisionally assume that's the left side of the arrow, great. Okay, maybe you see that. Okay? In fact, if I'm going about my business, that might be one thing that you could do. Alright, so you might see that and go, okay, I've got that there. Let me go ahead and do that. Okay? My line 3, provisionally assume that F, because I go down the list and you think, oh, no, that's the first thing that I see I can do. So I'm going to provisionally assume that. The goal here is to get a contradiction, any kind of contradiction. But I can do an arrow out now. Yay. Okay, and that gets me L.A. Arrow out 1 and 3. And then you go, oh, can I do an and out? You can here. It's not wrong, but look, if I do this and out and I get L, and A separately. That's not going anywhere. So this is one of the few times where I'd say, yeah, don't do it here because it's not going anywhere. There's kind of reason why. There's something we should have done earlier. That's why I guess I'm doing this the long way. Well, now what? Well, you have an option here. Look for when it comes to these conversions, De Morgan's law, material implication, conjunctive conditionality. Look and see, is there anywhere where I've got the same letters, like in the same kind of pattern, but just different connective and different squiggles here and here? Can I do a conversion here? Actually, yeah. Look what happens. I can do a De Morgan's law on either one of these. I think the simpler De Morgan's law to do here would be to do it on line 2. That ends up being a little tidier. If I can get as few squiggles as possible where it's useful to me, I'm probably going to go that route. So using De Morgan's law, look, keep the L, and I'm doing this on line 2. Keep the L, keep the A, change the symbol, change the slots. So outside is off. I'm going to turn the outside on. Left is on. I'm going to turn it off. Right is on. I'm going to turn it off. So I get squiggle L dot A. I gave myself too much space there to work with, but look, that's De Morgan's law on line 2. Again, if you're doing it now, again, I'm going to do it. I'm going to show you in a moment another way to do this problem that's shorter than this even, because this is an example of maybe going through it a little too quickly and not saying if I can do everything. You literally jump to a conclusion. I see it. Squiggle left. That's the left side of the arrow if I provisionally assume it, so I'm going to do that. What can we do now? Well, look, there's my 2 contraries. Look, L dot A is the exact same thing as L dot A with a squiggle in front of it. So I'm able to take that there, put that together with an and in, and indirect proof is complete. I can say here squiggle F is a thing, indirect proof 3 through 6, and now let's take a look at doing it through a shorter method. Alright, so now let's do number 14 the shorter way. And so this is a way where things get done a lot more quickly. Okay, and this is really predicated upon having a knowledge of when to use these. So watch how much more quickly this is done. So we got our arrow here. Okay, we can't do arrow out, modus tollens, double arrow out, double arrow in. No, and out's not a thing. This is in parentheses. And in, we could and these in. That's not helpful. Double negation, not helpful. Wedge in, nope. Wedge out, nope. And so success with this problem is really based on your familiarity with these moves. So what you want to look for in these is, do I have the same groups of letters together, but just with different like squiggle and symbol combinations? So look for here, we're looking to see, if I've got, can I switch from this to this? Then it's going to be De Morgan's law. Can I switch from this to this? And these are vice versa for all 3 of these. That's going to be material implication. Can I switch from this to this? That's conjunctive conditionality. So all these little switches. So look here. Which one of these do we see? I've got a dot to a wedge. So we can do a De Morgan's law here. What happens when we do De Morgan's law on line 2? Let's just test drive it. So we take the letters down because I see and I want to do De Morgan's law because I see there's a dot and a wedge, and De Morgan's law is where you switch from a dot to a wedge. So let's see. It's got the same letters. We got L and A, L and A. Let's see what happens when we do De Morgan's law on line 2. Bring the L and A down, switch the symbol from a wedge to a dot, and then the way De Morgan's law works is you switch all the negation slots. So again, like the shortcut over here is, for this one you switch outside left and right. For this one you switch just the left. And for this one, you just switch the outside and the right if you're doing these when it comes to negation slots. So De Morgan's law, we flip them all. So the outside is off, so we're going to turn it on. The left is on, so we're going to turn it off. The right is on, so we're going to turn it off. And this is De Morgan's law on line 2. And take a look at this. We'll go back to the top of the list now. Can I do an arrow out? No, I don't have an F. Can I do a modus tollens? Yeah, I can. Look. The right side of the arrow is L dot A. With De Morgan's law, what I just get? The contrary squiggle L dot A, which is the contrary of this right side. What does that mean I can do? Modus tollens? Get the contrary of the left side. What would that be? Squiggle F. That's our goal. So we get squiggle F, modus tollens, 1 and 3. So being familiar with doing these will make this process much more efficient if you can hunt for when it's appropriate to do them. Okay? And so now what I want to do from here, I've done all the problems from the book that I want to do. I'm going to transition into some practice problems from your upcoming quizzes. So we're going to take a look at some stuff that's going to be practice for quiz 6, which I think is quite easy, frankly. And then we'll take a look at some practice problems from quiz 7. We'll do both in here, because both these quizzes kind of cover the same ground, but in different ways. So first, let's talk about the quiz 6 stuff. Quiz 6 is a quiz that you'll do in Blackboard, and the way this one works, so when I say you'll do it in Blackboard, not only will you turn it in Blackboard like you've done quizzes 2 through 5, you'll do it in Blackboard. This is more like quiz 1, where you're actually doing multiple choice questions. Now, the way this one's going to work is it's going to ask you questions that look like this. It's going to say, I'm going to give you one sample question out of the 10 that you'll have. Here's one of them. Okay? So it'll say, this statement here, represented. Okay, so this statement, squiggle A, arrow, squiggle B, represented as a conjunction. So as an and statement is, or would be, and you've got the following options. And the options in Blackboard will be randomized. Okay, so don't say, oh, whichever one it ends up being. Don't say, oh, it's that one. It may not be. Okay. All right, we've got these options. Okay, so the statement squiggle A, arrow, squiggle B, represented as a conjunction, so as an and statement. Which one of these would it be? Now, I don't want this to be guesswork. All right, now if you can do quiz 6 is all questions like this. It'll give you some kind of statement, and it'll say, what would that be as either a conjunction or a conditional or a disjunction? Inclusive disjunction, mind you. There's no rule of substitution to switch among exclusive disjunctions that we've gone over yet. There actually is one, but it turns into something that may surprise you. So which one of these is it? So I don't want it to be guesswork. The answer to all these questions is simply to know this stuff that I was talking about a moment ago. So De Morgan's law, material implication, and conjunctive conditionality. Okay. So De Morgan's law is if you want to switch from wedges to dots and vice versa. That's what this symbol means. It means you can go either way. Material implication is switching from arrows to wedges and vice versa. And conjunctive conditionality is switching from arrows to dots and vice versa. And all you need to know for these is which negation slots do you flip. So for De Morgan's law, you flip all of them, outside, left, and right. For material implication, you just flip the left one. And for conjunctive conditionality, you flip the outside and the right. So what's going on here? What do we have? We have an arrow, and we want to turn it into a conjunction. That would be an and. So which one of these deals with arrows to ands? This one. So conjunctive conditionality. What do you do if you want to turn an arrow into an and? Coincidentally, also if you want to turn an and into an arrow. But what do you want to do if you turn an arrow into an and? All you do is switch the symbol, keep the letters the same, switch the symbol, and flip the outside and the right negation slots. So let's write it out here. We've got squiggle A, arrow, squiggle B. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop the letters down. They're not going to change. We're switching from an arrow to an and then it tells us what to do. Change the outside and the right negation slots. That's it. The outside is on, so we're going to turn it off. We don't deal with the left one here, so I don't care about it. And then this says also the right one, flip it as well. So the right one is activated. We're going to deactivate it. This is it. This, represented as a conjunction, is this, which means A here is correct. So really, for quiz 6, I kid you not, this is really not a trick when I say this. All you need to know is this for quiz 6. If you can commit this to memory or apply it, since this is online, you're good. This is all you need to know for quiz 6. It will be 10 questions, kind of like this one here. How do you turn this into a this? Okay, now just to practice, all right, this is not necessarily a question you have. If we wanted to turn this this statement into a disjunction. Okay, what would we do? Okay, we want to turn squiggle A, arrow, squiggle B into a disjunction. What would we do? Well, if you're going from, so I'm saying let's turn it into a wedge. What would that look like? Well, if you're going from an arrow to a wedge, which one do we use? Material implication. What you do there is you just flip the left. So watch this. We're going to, I'll put it up here. So look, we've got, I'm going to switch from an arrow to a wedge. So we'll change the symbol, drop the letters down, and it says the only thing when you're changing from an arrow to a wedge or vice versa is just the left. So the outside is on, we're going to keep it on. The left is off, we're going to turn it on. We don't mess with the right, we keep it as it is. So here it is. This as an arrow, squiggle A, arrow, squiggle B, is the same thing as saying, and this is through material implication, squiggle A, or squiggle B. Now just to come full circle, let's now do De Morgan's law. We've got a wedge. Let's turn that wedge into an and. And I'm not even going to have to write anything new. Watch this. If you want to go to him from a wedge to a dot, all you do is you keep the letters, change the symbol, and flip all three slots. Now look, here in our wedge, outside, left, and right are on, and we've come full circle. Look. That would be the same thing as A dot B here, where the outside, left, and right are deactivated. So all three of these, okay, there's the dot, there's the wedge, and there's the arrow for the exact same thing. These are all the same thing. But all you need to know to be able to make those determinations and distinctions is what's in this box here. That's it. That's all you need to know. Now, this is all you need to know for quiz 6, and the reason why there's a quiz on it is because it makes quiz 7 a bit easier and quiz 8 much, much easier when we get there. Okay? If you can do this stuff and have this committed to memory, quiz 8 will be much, much, much easier. Okay? Because quiz 8 is a bunch of other rules like this too, where you have to kind of see what's on the page and go, oh, I've got this thing, I can convert it into this. So it's a lot more conversion rules where if you can notice that something's there, you'll be able to switch it into something else. And you remember there were some problems that we did already where if you could see that you could do one of these, it could save you as many as 10 steps. When we get to stuff on quiz 8, it could save you as many as 20, 30 steps. Okay, where the problems would be just, even if they're doable, no one would want to do them, right? Unless you saw that you could do these shortcuts. And these rules of substitutions are basically shortcuts. All right, so let's look at some stuff now that would be applied from quiz 7 instead. Okay, where it's a little bit more sophisticated than this. This is very rudimentary. It's just 10 questions like this. So quiz 7 will be more traditional in that it will be more like quizzes 2 through 5. And what you'll need to do is, print out the PDF and fill it in and turn it in that way. So quiz 6 will be the last quiz that's in application like this. So let's take a look at a few from quiz 7 that you'll have, where the stuff that we just did here will be instrumental, but that will also include all the stuff on disjunctions too. All right, let's look at a sample problem from quiz 7. So here's one. So this is probably the longest translation one, but I'm giving it to you here in the prep for it. If you can do this one, you can do the other ones quite easily. So it says, let's highlight some of the connective language. So if you have the soul of Sif and have enough souls, comma, then, that's connective language, then the giant blacksmith of Anor Londo can fashion for you the great sword of Artorias, the cursed great sword of Artorias, or the great shield of Artorias. And so since this is a list, that means there's actually an or hiding here as well. So I'm just going to write the word or. So it's basically saying the great sword, or the cursed great sword, or the great shield. And then there's a semicolon here, and on the quiz this will feel much bigger, but that means this is where the stuff on this side is grouped together, and the stuff after this is grouped together. But each playthrough is a sufficient condition to acquire only one exclusively among the great shield of Artorias. Now, since it said exclusively, that means here this OR, there's the same list. This is actually an XOR, and that means since it's a list, this right here this time is actually an XOR as well of these three things. So let's translate this a little bit at a time and see what we get. So the first word I see is if. That means we've got an arrow. What's on the left side of the arrow? You've got the soul of Sif and enough souls, comma. So here's what's on the left side of the arrow. You've got the soul of Sif and enough souls. That's on the left side of the arrow. If you got that, then what's on the right side of the arrow? The giant blacksmith of Anor Londo can fashion for you the great sword of Artorias. And I said, or the cursed great sword of Artorias, or the great shield of Artorias. And I said here that semicolon means here's a stop. So all this is going to be, all of this that's come so far is itself going to be on one side of something, the side of this but, so it's going to be on one side of this conjunction. So ultimately this is going to be a conjunction. So let's first of all talk about the right side of the arrow. Is this just, if this is the right side of the arrow that we're looking at, is this dyadic? No. But this would be the right side of the arrow, but then I need to make the inside of this dyadic. Now since it's all ORs, it doesn't matter where I put the parentheses. I could put them around the G wedge C. I could also instead put them around the C wedge A. That's just as fine. And all this is on one side of the arrow, which means the next thing that's going to happen is a dot, and then that means all this is grouped together. So I'm going to put braces, so this is all one thing. All right, then from here, following the dot, what do we got? Okay. Each playthrough is a sufficient condition. Sufficient condition for what? To acquire only one exclusively. That's letting you know, hey, there's an XOR coming among the great sword of Artorias, XOR the cursed great sword of Artorias, XOR the great shield of Artorias. So it's saying on the right side of the arrow we've got G XOR C XOR A. So this is all on the right side of this arrow. And then inside here, where do the parentheses go? It doesn't matter. I could put them around the G XOR C. I could also put them around the C XOR A. That would be just as fine. Which means there's basically 4 possible combinations I could have in this problem. I could have, it could look like this. These parentheses could be here. These parentheses could be here, and these parentheses could be here. Any of those would be fine. But then, since all the stuff I just said from playthrough on is itself on the right side of this but, all this needs to be grouped together as well. And so right here, the way this is one version of the correct answer to this one. A lot of grouping stuff, but it's still straightforward. It's just big. But like I said, I've given it to you, so there's really no reason why you should get it wrong on the quiz. Okay, here's another translation one from quiz 7. This one says, if you've ever seen Spirited Away or Princess Mononoke, then you'll have a sense of what Hayao Miyazaki films are like. So, first word I see is an if, and the then isn't until here, which means everything up to this point is on the left side of the arrow. So what do we got? Spirited Away, wedge, Princess Mononoke. I know it's a wedge because it says or, but it doesn't say but, not both. And then there's an arrow. So what's on the right side of the arrow? You'll know what Miyazaki films are like. Alright, so this one's done. So this is what it would be. S, wedge, P, arrow, M. There are 5 translation problems on quiz 7. I've given you 2 of them. Now what I'm going to do is show you a translation into a proof. Alright, let's take a look at a translation into a proof. So this is one of 2 that you'll have on quiz 7. So look, the spice must flow. That's premise number 1. The spice must flow. Assumption number 1. Let's take a look at line 2. So that would mean what we're doing here on line 2 is, first of all, there's an arrow. If Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV is to attempt to remain in power on Khitan, then. So if he's going to remain in power on Khitan, then he must rid himself of House Atreides on Caladan. Okay? All of that, because it says moreover, which means there's a separation, and Yeah, he totally wants to do that. Assumption number 2. Okay. Line 3. If, so there's an arrow here, he rids of House Atreides on Caladan, and there's a semicolon there, meaning there's a separation. Okay, so that means there's C arrow, and then a bunch of other stuff, however much is here. Then he shall send the Atreides to planet Arrakis, and he shall have the Duke killed. Alright, so if he does this thing, okay, semicolon, then these 2 other things. What? He'll send the Atreides to planet Arrakis, and he'll have the Duke killed. Both those things. Okay. Next line. If the Duke is killed, so there's an arrow, there's a comma, letting you know there's the then, House Corno prevails. If the Duke is killed, House Corno prevails. Assumption number 4. Hence, which means here's what you're solving for. This, House Corno will prevail or shall be victorious, semicolon, which means there's the separation, so let's get this so far. House Corno will prevail or shall be victorious. Okay, which kind of or is that? It doesn't say but, not both, so it's inclusive. Okay. And since there's a separation here, I know this is grouped together. Nevertheless, what does that mean? God, the spice must flow. Okay, so these are all the assumptions and the conclusion in place. Let's solve. So first things first. Let's re-articulate all our moves. Arrow out, bonus Solons, double arrow out, double arrow in, and out, and in, double negation, wedge in, wedge out, the handy De Morgan's Law, material implication, conjunctive conditionality, and then if we need to, arrow in and indirect proof. Okay, so let's see. Any arrows not in parentheses? 1. Left side match? No. Right side contrary? No. Okay, no double arrows here. Dots. Yeah, we got these. All right, so let's break these down. That gets us S arrow C and just S. And out on line 2 for both. And you'll see that actually lines us up very quickly for an arrow out, because now we have a new arrow not in parentheses with its left side match immediately there. Line 7, that gets us C. Arrow out. And that would be 5 and 6. And now with the C, can we do another arrow out? Yeah, from this arrow, it's been here since the beginning. Okay, it gets this left side match of A dot D. Arrow out, 3 and 7. If we go down the list, what's the next thing I can do? Another and out on these dots here. Okay, we get A and D separately. Granted, I will never need to use this line 9, so it's kind of superfluous, but you might not see that going into it. Like, I will never use line 9. It will never be cited after this. Okay, then what can I do with that D? Arrow out. Okay, it's a left side match for that D that I've had since the beginning, which gets me P. Arrow out, 4 and 10. Alright, now I've got P. What do I need to get? I'm trying to get P, wedge, V, and F. Now look, I actually already have the F. I've had it since line 1. I already have the P here. I have it in line 11. Notice nowhere in here is there a V. It does not appear. But since it's a wedge, I know I can do a wedge in. It's line 12. That's going to be P, wedge, V. Wedge in. Then what do we add the V onto? Line 11, and then check it out. Now I just do an and in of P, wedge V, and F. And that's and in 12 and 1. And again, what we were going for was we were going for an and I told you early in the semester, if you're trying to go for one of these, most likely scenario, your last move is going to be an and in. There it is, 12 and 1. All right, now I've done one of these translation ones. Now let's do a proof where no translation is required. All right, let's take a look at one of the proofs that's on quiz 7 that you'll need to do. So this one right here. So first of all, can I do an arrow out with these in play? A, X, or B, X, or M, squiggle T, U, arrow, squiggle T, arrow, squiggle S, and then T, wedge U. Let's see, do I have arrows in play? I do. Not in parentheses. Any I can use? Left side matches? No. Right side contraries? No. Double arrows I don't need to worry about. Any dots to break apart? No. Double negations to do? No. Wedge in? No. Alright, wedge out. Do I have a disjunction? I do. Okay, now what I want to look for, remember when I'm looking to do a wedge out, is this on the left side of an arrow somewhere? No. And neither is this one. So that's not a thing. So then, this is where quiz 6 will come in handy. Any of these useful? Is there something I could make? And what you want to do with these too is see if you can line yourself up to do especially one of these easier things above. Can I make myself an arrow out or a modus tollens or an and out or something like that? And what I see here, the most obvious example that I see is line 4 here. I've got T wedge U. Now, I'm looking at this because if you know these well, so remember De Morgan's law, if we want to switch between these two, we switch the outside left and right slots. Material implication, if you want to switch from an arrow to a wedge, you switch this to the left, and conjunctive conditionality, we switch the outside and the right to switch between this one and this one. Well, when I'm looking here at these and considering these, like when I want to turn this into maybe De Morgan's law on it, what would that get me? Squiggle, squiggle T, and squiggle U. No, I don't want to do that. Okay, material implication. Maybe try that on line 4 because it's a wedge. It's pretty simple to get me squiggle T, arrow U, because all you do in that one is just change the left. Okay, and look, what that would do if I did it is it would set me up for an arrow out here. So that's the kind of thing you want to look for. Would it do something easy for you? And that would unlock the U. The U would then unlock an arrow out here. So yeah, I'm going to go for that. So this is material implication on line 4. And then now that easily lines me up for an arrow out, which unlocks U, arrow out, 5 and 2. And then that is the left side match here, which is going to unlock this for me, squiggle T, arrow, squiggle S. That's arrow out, 3 and 6. And look, because I already had that squiggle T in line 2, this here actually is another arrow I can immediately do an arrow out on. What do I get? Squiggle S, because here's the arrow, the left side of squiggle T, I already have a match. So this is arrow out, 7 and 2. And look again, can I do an arrow out? No. Okay, I don't have a left side match of this. I don't have any new left side matches. Do I have any right side contraries? So start at the top here. Do I have the contrary of S? Yeah, I literally just got it. So what does that mean I can get? I can get the contrary of this monstrosity over here. What would that look like? It would be all of this with a squiggle in front of it. Let's go ahead and do it because we can. That would be all that's there. A, X or B, X or M, with a squiggle in front of it. Modus tollens, 1 and 8. And that's exactly what my goal is, which means this proof is done. So this is a demonstration of the kind of stuff that you'll see on quiz 7. Next video, next stuff we're going to go into is quiz 8, where this rule list is going to grow substantially. And while that may sound intimidating, the rule list is going to grow in such a way that it's going to have a bunch of shortcuts. There's going to be ways to do problems much more quickly. It's actually going to, in my opinion, feels liberating to be able to do a lot of these problems much more simply. Some that took us 10 or more steps, now we can deal with in one step. And so what I'll be doing in the next video is going over those rules and looking at some problems from earlier quizzes where we could have used these and they would have been helpful, okay, if we had known them at the time. And what you'll be doing on quiz 8 is employing all these rules and the new rules in more sophisticated problems to get through them as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible.